Guys, it is finally starting to feel like fall, and I am completely in love with it. From the time that fall starts all the way through Christmas is like my favorite time of the year. It's just always so joyful, you know, it's the time where all the family gets together, all the food, seeing your relatives that you haven't seen in a long time. They all kind of come together as one during these holidays. And you have all the amazing food like turkey and green bean casserole and just all the wonderful dishes. And it's my excuse to eat. Yeah. But I use that as an excuse all the time. And also the weather is just so good. Like, I love summer, but honestly, sometimes it just gets way too hot. And I would rather be cold because you can always put more clothes on than you can taking them off. So you have the cold, crisp air, you have the leaves on the ground, just beautiful colors. I love fall all around. But this video is not to talk about fall. We're actually going to be getting into something that I've been meaning to film for a while, and I haven't been able to, because I'm terrible at explaining things. So we are going to go ahead and finally get into it. What's up, everybody? Dominic Hartman here with Endless Souls Photography, back with another video, and this one is going to be a good one, so please stay until the end. Now I want to go over the 3 basic settings that you're going to need to learn to start your photography journey. So I had mentioned that I was going to be making this video in my video a few months back called 5 Tips to Become a Better Photographer. If you haven't seen that video, I will link it in the description below. I would highly recommend going and watching that. Or don't. I mean, who am I to tell you what to do? But seriously, go watch it. It's a good one. Okay, so we are going to be getting into ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. So ISO is the main dish. ISO is how sensitive the camera's sensor is to light. So a higher ISO means that the camera is going to be more sensitive to light, so it'll be brighter. But be careful, because ISO also affects the image noise as well. So the higher the number, the more light you're going to let in, and the lower the number, the less light you're going to let in. Okay, so next we have shutter speed. Shutter speed is how long the camera's shutter stays open, which is measured in time. A longer shutter speed results in motion blur, while faster shutter speed freezes motion. So in this first photo, you can see the subject is moving around, but it's at a faster shutter speed, so the subject is actually froze in the frame. So you can tell he's moving, but nothing in his body is moving. So it's not, you know, there's nothing blurry on it. As far as this one is shot with a slower shutter speed, and as you can tell, the subject is kind of blurred out because he's moving. So pretty simple, right? Lastly, we have aperture. Now aperture is how big the opening is that lets light into the camera, measured in f-stops. A larger aperture allows more light in, while a smaller aperture lets less light. So when you think of aperture, just think of it like your eye. It's pretty much the eye of your camera. Aperture also affects the depth of field. So when shooting a subject, you're going to want a higher aperture. So that way, when you shoot your subject will be more focused and the background will be more blurred out. So you'll be more separated from the background. And it depends on how far the background is that you're shooting. For example, this photo is a larger aperture. As you can see, I am in focus and the background is blurred out. Compared to this one, which is a smaller aperture, and you can see that I am still in focus, but the background is not as blurred out, so I'm not as separated from the background as I would be with a larger aperture. So when it comes to all of these settings, you're going to be playing with pretty much all 3 settings. The one that I don't touch the most would be ISO, because I like to try to keep that at the lowest number possible, just so that way I don't have to risk having noise in my photos. Now, obviously, if you're gonna be shooting in lower light, you're gonna have to raise your ISO or your shutter speed, depending on what you're doing. So normally with my ISO, I try to keep it around 100. I try not to go over 400 ISO. I mean, my camera can handle more than that, but I just try not to go that way just because I hate noise grain, and it's one of my biggest things. I don't like it. I mean, I'm okay with a little bit of grain for photos that I put grain in, but if the photo's grainy because I took a terrible photo, I don't like it. I hate editing it. It's just biggest pet peeve. So if I'm shooting a subject, I'll try to keep my aperture at like f1.8 to maybe f2.0. Now if I'm doing families, I'll probably raise it a little bit more, just so that way the family is more in focus. And if I'm gonna be shooting, let's say like a landscape, I will normally shoot like at f8 or sometimes even lower than that, just to make sure everything is kind of in focus. I want to be as focused as possible. And lastly, we have the shutter speed. So the shutter speed, like I said, it depends on what I'm shooting. If I'm shooting, let's say, a family, and I have mom and dad standing in the middle looking at each other, and I have the kids running around. Now if I want, there's two ways I can go about it. If I want to have a freeze frame, I'm gonna want to shoot at a faster shutter speed than I would if I wanted the kids to be kind of blurred out and the mom and dad be all in focus, freeze framed, and the kids running around, which both of those are pretty cool. I think it's kind of cool having the mom and dad standing in the middle and the kids are just blurred out. I think it's kind of a cool photo. So it all depends on what you're trying to capture. But yeah, those are the three settings, and like I said, ISO is going to be try to keep your ISO as low as possible. Your aperture, depending on what you're shooting, if it's going to be landscape, you want to have a smaller aperture, and if you're shooting a subject, you're going to want to have a bigger aperture. And shutter speed, depending on if you want to freeze the frame, and shutter speed, if you want to have more of a motion blur, you're going to want to have a slower shutter speed, and if you want to have everything that's moving in crisp focus with no motion blur, you're going to want to have a higher shutter speed. So just go out and practice these three settings, and sooner or later you will not be shooting in auto anymore. So that is all for this video. If you found this video helpful, smash that like button, hit the subscribe, and turn on those notifications so you get notified every single time I post. And until next time, we will see you in the next one. Peace. Intro. Dab. You got this. You got it.